My name is Sergeant Nora Bishop. I'm 47, and at 1:00 a.m., my daughter staggered onto my porch with a split lip, one eye sealed shut, and a phone buzzing with threats from her husband. The porch light flickered like a bad heartbeat. Blood dotted my shirt as I lifted her. In the hallway, my pressed uniform hung straight as a verdict. I called the ER, pressed a cold towel to her mouth, and watched the messages roll. And don't open your mouth. Don't ruin this. They thought fear would keep us quiet. But what they didn't know was, before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Stories like this one aren't easy to tell, but they matter. If you've ever felt silenced, your click keeps this truth alive. I wasn't always Sergeant Bishop, long before the badge. Before the paperwork stacked like bricks in my office. Before the protocols and the cold steel of a patrol car. I was just a daughter holding onto my father's hand as he showed me a stretch of desert land. The sky was burnt orange that evening. Cicadas buzzing like 1,000 clocks ticking at once. He pointed at the dry mesquite trees and said, "This is ours. Nora, when storms come, this land will still be here." He slipped the silver ring from his finger into my palm. "One day, you'll know when to wear it." I was 10 years old. I didn't understand then. But that image, the ring heavy in my small hand, the land glowing under a dying sun, etched itself into me. Years later, that same ring would spin between my fingers each time I felt myself losing control. A reminder. My father wasn't a man of many words. But when he spoke, he meant them. He worked himself to exhaustion to buy that land after the drought of '78 nearly broke our family. He called it proof that survival could leave behind something solid. When he passed, he left the land in both my name and my daughter Lila's. A chain from him to me. And from me to her. That chain is what Derek Vaughn tried to cut. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to know who Lila was before the bruises. Before the silence crept into her eyes. Lila grew up chasing fireflies in the backyard. Her hair always tangled. Cheeks sunburned. Eyes bright. When she was 5, she wandered off at the county fair. I found her sitting on a hay bale, hands full of popcorn, telling a goat her entire life story. When I scooped her up, she promised, "I'll always find my way back to you, Mama." I laughed then, thinking it was just a child's vow. I didn't know those words would echo years later at 1 in the morning, when she staggered onto my porch broken and terrified. My work at Riverton PD shaped much of how I saw the world. 20 years on patrol teaches you not just the smell of trouble, but the faces behind it. I handled too many domestic calls where the victims recanted by sunrise. A bruise explained away as clumsiness. A scream written off as an argument over money. And always that heavy silence in the report. Victim declined to press charges. Each of those cases stayed with me, carved under my skin. I kept photos, copies of reports, timestamps, an obsession with documentation, born from one night I'll never forget. It was my 5th year on the job. We got a call from a trailer park just outside town. By the time we arrived, the woman inside had bled out from stab wounds. Neighbors said she'd screamed for help hours earlier. But no one wanted to get involved. I saw her lifeless body under the flickering kitchen light. A pool of blood spreading across linoleum. And I swore that if it was ever my family, I wouldn't let silence win. That oath hardened me in ways I didn't even notice until Lila stumbled back into my arms decades later. Lila's teenage years were restless. She had a wild streak, always craving more than Riverton could offer. By 17, she was sneaking into late-night concerts at the Dusty Spur, her smile wide enough to charm her way past the door. I grounded her, lectured her, locked her car keys away. None of it stuck. But she always came home, always slipped into the kitchen at midnight for leftovers, whispering, "Don't be mad, Mama. I'm fine." I pretended to scold. But secretly, I was grateful. She kept that promise from when she was 5. She always found her way back. When she met Derek, I smelled smoke before the fire. He was handsome enough in that slick pawn shop owner way, clean boots, practiced grin, just enough cologne to mask the cigarettes. He shook my hand firmly the first time, looking me dead in the eye. But his gaze lingered a second too long, testing me. Men like him thrived on control. I'd seen his type in interrogation rooms and on front porches, sweet talkers who tightened invisible ropes around women until escape felt impossible. Still, love makes the young blind. Lila called him charming, said he listened, said he wanted to build a life with her. They married fast, too fast. A courthouse wedding with no photos, just a certificate signed in cheap ink. I bit my tongue, because mothers learn that pushing too hard only drives daughters further away. I told myself maybe I was too suspicious, that maybe Derek was just rough around the edges. But deep down, I knew better. It started with small things. Derek accidentally keeping Lila's phone on silent. He offered to help with her bank account, setting up a joint card. When I tried to visit, she always seemed rushed, glancing at the door like she was waiting for permission. Once, at Thanksgiving, I asked about her friends from college. She smiled too wide, said she'd lost touch. And Derek cut in. She's got all she needs right here. He said it with a laugh, but I heard the iron behind it. I wanted to speak, but I swallowed the words, afraid to push her further into his grip. I didn't know it then, but every silence carved a deeper wound. By the time Lila was 24, I rarely saw her without Derek by her side. He slid into family gatherings like he owned the air in the room. He'd slap my shoulder, call me Sarge, as though mocking my badge, reminding me that inside the Bishop home, his rules mattered more. At Christmas, when I gave Lila a necklace passed down from my mother, Derek's hand closed around it before hers did. Beautiful, he said, but let's keep it safe at home. The words burned, but Lila smiled weakly, tucked the box in her purse, and changed the subject. I watched the light in her eyes dim, little by little, year after year. And then came the land. My father's land. The deed with both our names. That land was more than property, it was legacy. One evening, Derek cornered me outside the pawn shop. He leaned against the doorway, smoke curling from his cigarette. That land's wasted sitting out there. Sergeant, he said, grinning. Could be money. Could be a future. His tone made it sound like he already owned it. I didn't answer. I just turned away. But I caught the look in his eyes, the calculation. And I knew then he wouldn't stop until he tried to take it. I didn't know it back then. But that conversation would matter later. It was the first crack in the ground beneath us. The first sign of the storm that would pull Lila to my doorstep. Bleeding and broken. Years after my father's promise. If you want to understand why I moved with such cold precision when Lila came back to me at 1 in the morning, you have to see the long trail that brought us there. My life as an officer and as a mother had been two rivers running parallel. But they always crossed in moments I couldn't ignore. I remember a night years back. A monsoon storm rolling over Riverton. Lightning cracked across the desert, turning the whole sky into a battlefield. I sat in my patrol car, radio humming static, rain pounding so hard it blurred the windshield. I just cleared a domestic call, another woman insisting she was fine, her split lip shining under the kitchen light. I parked under that storm and whispered to myself, if it were my family, I wouldn't let anyone rewrite the truth. I didn't know it then, but I was rehearsing for the night Lila would need me most. There were other signs I missed, though I shouldn't have. Derek's control started with money, as it often does. Lila had always been independent. She worked double shifts at the diner through college, came home smelling of fries and burnt coffee, pockets jingling with tips. She liked earning her own way. But after she married Derek, that spark dulled. She told me once, it's easier if he handles the bills. I hate math. I knew that was a lie. She'd been top of her class in algebra. But Derek had convinced her that independence was messy, that security meant letting him manage. He clipped her wings one transaction at a time. Then came the isolation. At family dinners, I noticed her phone always face down on the table. If a friend called, she silenced it quickly, whispering she'd catch up later. Derek watched her every move with a lazy grin, like a cat watching a mouse. I confronted him once, in my own house, after noticing he'd parked down the street for over an hour, waiting for her to finish a visit. "You don't trust her to be alone with her mother?" I asked. He smirked, leaned close, and said, "Sergeant, trust is earned." My fists clenched around my coffee mug, but I stayed silent. I regret that silence to this day. Even in those years, Lila tried to keep pieces of herself alive. She'd bring me fresh tortillas from a neighbor or hum along to old records while helping me decorate the Christmas tree. But Derek always managed to insert himself. One Christmas Eve, she gave me a framed photo of my father on the land he loved, smiling against the sunset. Before I could hang it, Derek said, "Nice picture. Shame the land's just sitting empty. Would fetch a good price now." I laughed it off. But the frame sat unopened for months. Every time I looked at it, I felt his shadow creeping closer. By 25, Lila was a stranger in her own skin. She wore long sleeves in summer, said she was tired more often than not, and her laughter, once easy and loud, became rare. At her birthday dinner, Derek made a toast, clinking his glass loudly, "To the woman who keeps my house in order." He said it like a joke, but she lowered her eyes, embarrassed, while everyone chuckled. I wanted to smash his glass right there. Instead, I swallowed my anger, feeling it carve deeper inside me. I didn't know it then, but that moment would matter later, when I stood in court and replayed every time his jokes covered real chains. There's one memory that haunts me more than others. Lila showed up at my place on a Sunday morning, holding a pie tin. "Just wanted to visit," she said, her smile thin. She set the tin on the counter, and when she rolled up her sleeves to wash dishes, I saw bruises on her wrists, faint but clear. I froze. She caught my gaze and pulled the sleeves back down. "Mom, don't," she whispered. "Please don't." Her voice cracked, a plea wrapped in fear. I should have pressed, but I didn't. Instead, I hugged her, pie and all, and said nothing. That silence is a scar I carry. Still, I noticed patterns. Derek's pawn shop, Vaughn and Trade, became a place of whispered rumors. I'd hear about him running shady deals, moving stolen goods, lending cash under the table. I investigated quietly, but could never pin him. Each time, he slipped away. Paperwork just clean enough. Witnesses too scared to talk. He was slippery, like oil on water. But I knew the truth: he was building his power off intimidation, the same way he built his grip on Lila. Then came the land again. The county clerk, Gideon Pike, flagged me down at the grocery store one morning. "Nora, saw your daughter's name pop up in a transfer file. Odd stuff." He didn't say more then, but his words lodged in me like a splinter. I didn't confront Lila. I didn't want to sound accusatory. But the dread grew. I remembered my father's words. "This land will still be here." And I feared it wouldn't. One night, I caught Lila standing outside the fence of that property. The moon was full, lighting her face in silver. I pulled over, rolled down the window, and asked what she was doing. She shrugged. "Just wanted to see it. Grandpa worked so hard." Her eyes were wet, though she tried to hide it. Derek wasn't with her that night. And for a brief moment, I saw the little girl chasing fireflies again. But then she looked over her shoulder, as though expecting him to appear. That glance told me everything. Even here, on land meant to protect her, she didn't feel free. I didn't know it then, but that moment would matter later. It was the last time I saw her near that land before everything unraveled. The past is never dead weight. It's ammunition. Every bruise I ignored. Every silence I swallowed. Every rumor I dismissed, they all came back when she collapsed on my porch at 100 a.m. And because of those memories, I didn't freeze. I documented. I collected. I built the case I'd once wished I could build for strangers who never made it out alive. That's why, when I looked at the silver ring my father gave me, spinning it before speaking, I wasn't just a mother. I was a witness. And this time, I swore. The truth would not be rewritten. The weeks after Lila's collapse at my door didn't ease. They sharpened. Derek's threats didn't stop when she left his house. They only grew more creative. It started with the texts, short, clipped, filled with menace. Open your mouth and that land goes up in smoke. Another, you think your badge will keep you safe. Paper burns easy. Each message came at odd hours. 200 a.m. 430 a.m. Like he was watching the clock just to break her sleep. I backed them up to an encrypted drive. Printed copies. Time-stamped each page. It was procedure, but it was also survival. Then came the photograph. Slipped under my front door one morning. Folded in half. When I opened it, I saw the front of my house taken at 2:17 a.m. from across the street. The porch light caught just enough of my outline through the blinds. Scrawled on the back, next time I won't knock. I bagged it in an evidence sleeve. Logged it. My stomach twisted. But my hand stayed steady. The town, meanwhile, buzzed with gossip. Riverton isn't a city, it's a web. At the farmer's market, voices followed me. She's just using her badge to go after her son-in-law. At the diner, whispers rolled from booth to booth. Lila probably made it up. You know how young wives exaggerate. Each word landed like grit in an open wound. My instinct was to snap back, but I forced myself silent. Every rumor would burn itself out once the truth was nailed down in black and white. That was the only way forward. One afternoon, Gideon Pike from the county clerk's office called me in. He had a file spread across his desk. Papers fanned out like a deck of cards. Nora. This came through 2 days after Lila left Derek. It's a deed transfer. Land moved from her name to a woman named Tessa Loomis. He tapped the notary's stamp. Here's the problem. Brent Lutz signed this at 9:14 p.m. His logbook says he clocked out at 5:00. You see the gap I did? It was glaring. A notary who signs off duty isn't notarizing. He's selling his stamp. Gideon lowered his voice. The one who filed it claimed to be acting under family authorization. He wrote down your last name. My jaw clenched. Derek wasn't just stealing from Lila. He was dragging my name into it. I took certified copies. Every page stamped and sealed. As I slid the folder into my bag, Gideon leaned close. Be careful. Someone inside pushed this fast. The words echoed in my chest. It meant Derek wasn't working alone. Back home, I spread the papers across the dining table. The same table where Lila once colored with crayons. The ink signatures. The crooked letters pretending to be hers. Glared at me. My father's land was being siphoned away through lies. That wasn't just theft, it was an erasure of history. I logged each page, photographing the notary stamp with a macro lens, noting the pressure points in the pen strokes. Years on the force had taught me small details, win cases. But the weight pressed heavier when I realized what came next. If Derek controlled the deed, he could leverage it. Loans, mortgages, lines of credit that would bury Lila in debt she didn't even sign for. I called Addie. Kelsey Rhodes. A sharp young lawyer I trusted. Her voice cut through the static on the line. Nora. If he already filed, we have to move fast. Fraudulent deed or not. Banks treat it as clean until challenged. He could open a HELOC tomorrow. The image hit me like a blow. Derek walking into a bank, smiling, pulling thousands out against land he stole with a pin. Lila would be left holding an empty bag and a mountain of debt. That was the nightmare. More than bruises or whispers. The trap wasn't just fists, it was paperwork. Meanwhile, Eunice Garland, my sharp-eyed neighbor, shuffled over one evening holding her iPad. "Got something you should see," she said. Her Ring camera had caught Lila arriving at 1:02 a.m. that night. Voice cracking. Begging, "Don't let him find me." The audio was tinny, but it cut straight to the bone. I backed up the file twice. Once to a flash drive. Once to the cloud. Watching it again. Hearing the desperation in her voice. I felt my chest tighten. But I also felt the case grow stronger. This wasn't rumor. This was time-stamped fact. The escalation didn't stop there. Someone, likely Derek, slipped another envelope under my door. This time, the note read, "Come di, nilhom one mut conlan nu." The words were smeared. But the meaning was clear. I handled it with gloves, bagged it, and dusted for prints at my kitchen counter. A partial lifted clean right thumb. Angled. I saved it. Logged it. Ready to match if we ever pulled Derek in. Captain Sonia Rivas called me into her office not long after. She looked at me across the desk. Her face tight. "Nora, you know you're too close to this. You can't lead the case. ADA Ortega will handle it from here. Every communication goes through him." "I understand," I said, voice low, but inside, I burned. Being sidelined felt like being disarmed. Still, rules mattered. If I bent them, Derek would use it to paint me as a badge-wielding vigilante. So I pivoted. I wasn't Sergeant Bishop anymore. I was Nora. Mother. Complainant. Witness. I'd let the paper trail do the talking. That night, I sat at my table, ring twisting on my finger. Files spread in front of me. I thought about every domestic case I'd worked where the victim recanted, where the bruises faded before the court date, where silence won. I swore it wouldn't happen this time, because Derek hadn't just laid hands on my daughter. He was trying to steal her bloodline, the land her grandfather left, and that crossed a line deeper than any bruise. The following week brought a new kind of tension. Not fists, not threats. Numbers. Kelsey called me into her office, where a whiteboard was already filled with arrows and notes. She pointed to one line and read, "Credit inquiry, HELOC. He's already probing," she said. "Derek filed for a line of credit using the forged deed. If it goes through, they'll wire money within days." I felt my stomach twist. It meant he wasn't just stealing land. He was turning it into debt that would cling to Lila like barbed wire. If the loan closed, even reversing the deed might not erase the damage. Banks don't care about bruises. They care about signatures. That night, I parked across from Vaughn and Trade, his pawn shop. The place reeked of oil and stale smoke. From the window, I saw him hunched over the counter, counting bills with that cocky grin carved on his face. Every instinct screamed to storm inside, to throw the evidence folder in his lap and watch his smirk crack. But I stayed in the car. Cold protocol. Let the system choke him with his own paper trail. The following evening I went to Dusty Spur, the bar where Tessa Loomis spent most of her nights. She was sitting in a booth, red dress clinging to her shoulders, eyeliner smudged like she hadn't slept. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside were two things: a copy of the forged deed with her name and her latest credit report. The unpaid payday loan glared from the page. She laughed at first. Brittle. "You think this scares me?" But her hand trembled as she read. Then she whispered, "He promised me a cut. Said Lila wouldn't fight back. Said you'd never risk your badge." Her laugh broke into a sob. I thought I was getting a new start. Turns out I'm the fool. I leaned closer. Voice steady. "You're not the fool if you walk away now." Testify, and you'll get a deal. Stay silent, and you'll go down with him. Tessa stared at the papers, then nodded, tears streaking her mascara. I'll talk. Just make sure I'm safe. The tide shifted that night. I added her statement to the growing binder. Each tab, another nail in Derek's coffin. But he wasn't done. 2 nights later, my smart lock app pinged at 2:17 a.m. Someone had tried my door code 3 times. Wrong entries. A public traffic cam nearby caught his truck's plates at the same minute. Idling at the intersection. He wanted me to know he could still get close. I logged it. Screenshot every detail. Printed the timestamps. Fear pressed at my ribs. But I kept my face stone. At Sunday service, whispers thickened again. She's dragging family matters into court. Lila's just like her mother, always dramatic. I kept my back straight, head high, though inside the bitterness gnawed. That's how abusers win, by painting truth as theater. Later that week, Eunice Garland stopped by, clutching a notebook. He's been circling, she said. Black pickup. Late at night. I logged the times. Her notes were meticulous dates. Hours. Even the sound of his muffler. My ring caught one more clip. Truck slowing. Driver leaning out. Staring at your house. She handed me the flash drive. The weight of it felt heavier than metal. The final straw came in the courthouse parking lot. After a preliminary hearing where the judge agreed to freeze activity on the land until trial. Derek caught me walking to my car. He leaned against his truck. Smirk sharp. Badge won't save you, he said under his breath. I stopped. Turned to face him. Ring twisting on my finger. It never had to. Paper did. His smirk faltered for the first time. He pushed off the truck, muttering curses. But I walked away calm. My hands were steady. My steps measured. Because I knew the truth. Every text, every forged line, every attempt to rattle me was already boxed, copied, ready for court. At home, I laid the binder open across the table. Photos, ring footage, fraudulent deed, notary logs out of sync, Hellock inquiries, Tessa's sworn statement, traffic cam plate shots, Eunice's logs, each tab a weapon sharper than any knife. I sat back, breathing slow. Derek thought he was writing the story. What he didn't know was that every move of his was being cataloged, time-stamped, notarized against him. He thought intimidation worked in silence. But silence had ended the night. Lila knocked on my door. The escalation was complete. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were preparing for war, the kind fought in daylight. Under oath. With paper as blade and truth as shield. The courtroom was full before I even walked in. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of neighbors. Curious strangers. Even a couple of reporters from the county paper. The air buzzed with whispers that stopped like a snapped wire the moment Judge Malcolm Avery entered. His gavel struck once. All rise. I stood at the plaintiff's table. Binder laid flat in front of me. Across the aisle, Derek lounged in his suit jacket. Smirk plastered on his face, as if the outcome was already his. Tessa Loomis sat 3 rows back. Head down. Hair hiding her eyes. Lila squeezed my hand. Her fingers clammy but strong. ADA? Miles Ortega rose first. His voice calm but sharp. Your Honor, this is not a matter of rumor or family grievance. This is about violence, fraud, and coercion proven by documentation. He motioned for the first exhibit. Dr. Layla Shaw took the stand. She explained each bruise. The split lip. The abdominal trauma. These injuries are inconsistent with a fall, she said firmly. They are consistent with blunt force impact. The photos were projected on a screen. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Lila turned her face away. I kept my eyes steady. Next came the video from Eunice Garland's ring camera. The grainy footage showed Lila at 1:02 a.m. knocking on my door, her voice breaking. "Don't let him find me." The sound filled the chamber. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Ortega continued, presenting text messages. Derek's words lit up the screen. "Open your mouth and that land goes up in smoke." Another, "I'm outside. Don't test me." Jurors shifted uneasily. The weight of menace impossible to miss. Then came the forged deed. Clerk Gideon Pike testified about the notary log, the missing signatures, the fact it had been filed after hours. The notary was not on duty at the time indicated, he said. He tapped the page with one finger. "This is irregular at best. Fraudulent at worst." My ring turned slowly on my finger as Notary Brent Lutz was called. His eyes sagged, sweat beading his forehead. Under questioning, he admitted, "Yes." I signed off. "Yes." It was after hours. Derek paid me cash. A collective murmur rolled across the room. Derek's smirk cracked for the first time. Then the most fragile witness, Tessa. She walked stiffly to the stand, hands trembling. At first her voice shook. But then the words spilled. "Derek told me if I signed, the land would be ours. He practiced Lila's signature in front of me. Said nobody would care. Said her mother would never risk her badge." She pointed at Derek. "He used me. He used everyone." Derek shot to his feet. "You liar," the gavel slammed. "Sit down, Mr. Vaughn." Judge Avery barked. Deputies stepped forward. Derek's jaw worked furiously, but he dropped back into his chair. His composure was unraveling thread by thread. Finally, Ortega pressed play on a voicemail pulled from Derek's phone records. His voice filled the speakers. Low and menacing, "She'll sign or I'll sign for her." The words hung in the room like poison. No one moved. Even Derek's lawyer shifted uneasily, shuffling papers he couldn't use to shield his client. When it was my turn, I rose. The courtroom seemed to shrink around me, every eye fixed. I spoke slowly, deliberately, the way I did on the street when chaos demanded order. "I am a sergeant with Riverton PD, but I am here today as a mother. The man who hit my daughter tried to steal her inheritance and silence her with fear. He thought intimidation was stronger than truth. But truth leaves a trail, and we have followed it here." I tapped the binder. Its tabs fanned like a soldier's medals. Every page, every timestamp, every signature shows the same thing: a pattern of violence and fraud designed to strip my daughter of safety and of dignity. "That ends today." The judge leaned forward, hands steepled. His ruling came deliberate, steady as a drumbeat. "This court finds sufficient evidence to grant a permanent protective order for Ms. Lila Bishop. The deed is nullified. Ownership restored. The attempted helic is void. Furthermore, the matter is referred to the district attorney for prosecution on charges of domestic violence, fraud, and witness intimidation." A collective exhale swept the room. Deputies stepped forward. Metal cuffs clicked around Derek's wrists, the sound sharp as gunfire. He twisted, snarled, tried to lunge toward Tessa. The deputies hauled him back, his fury spilling across the room. Judge Avery struck the gavel one final time. Court adjourned. As Derek was dragged out, his eyes locked on me. "This isn't over." He spat. I didn't flinch. I twisted my father's silver ring once and said coldly, "For you?" "It is." The words stopped him cold. His face drained, his smirk finally erased. Lila leaned into me, tears spilling. I held her tight, but my eyes stayed fixed on the door Derek had just disappeared through. Because I knew this battle was won. But the war, the echo of what he'd stirred, was only beginning. After the gavel dropped and Derek was led away, the courthouse emptied like a punctured lung. Voices echoed in the hallway, neighbors whispering, reporters murmuring, relatives shaking their heads. I walked Lila out through the side door, away from the crowd, my hand firm on her back. The desert air hit us, cool and dry, carrying the faint smell of dust and exhaust. For the first time in weeks, she stood straighter, but the shadows under her eyes told me this wasn't over. Healing is never a single day's work. It's a long road with jagged edges. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, the same spot where Lila had collapsed into my arms. Only now, the table was covered with files, flash drives, certified copies, our shield of paper and ink. I opened my laptop and backed up every record to 3 different drives. One for me, one for my attorney, one for safe deposit, because men like Derek rarely act alone. And whispers in town had already shifted toward a new name, Mr. Hale, a shadow who funded Derek's schemes. The man behind the almost signed HELOC. If Derek was a snake, Hale was the desert he slithered in. I turned the silver ring on my finger, hearing my father's voice in the silence. Don't fight with rage. Fight with record. That's exactly what I planned. 2 days later, a plain envelope arrived at my station locker. No return address. Inside was a single photo of Lila walking from Dolores's porch to her car. On the back, scribbled in block letters, "Paper doesn't stop bullets." I read it twice, then slipped it into the evidence folder. I didn't flinch, because whoever sent it didn't understand. Threats are temporary. Documentation lasts. At night, when Riverton quieted and the highway hummed dulled to silence, I sometimes parked my patrol car near the plot of land my father left us. I'd step out, boots crunching gravel, and breathe in the dry sage air. The land was still ours. For now, I knew this wasn't the last knock on my door. Not with men like Hale in the shadows. But I also knew this. The trail Derek started had led straight into my hands. And whoever came next would find the same thing, waiting evidence lined up like dominoes, ready to fall. They thought they could scare us silent. But what they didn't know was that silence is what I buried with Derek's smirk. From here on out, every move I made would echo louder than fear. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, if you've ever carried bruises no one wanted to see, then you know what my daughter and I walked through. This story isn't only ours, it belongs to every voice silenced by fear, every truth buried under gossip. That's why I'm sharing it with you. Because silence only protects the guilty, never the wounded. So, if any part of this story hit home, leave a comment with where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit subscribe. This story isn't over, not for us. And maybe not for you.